The morning sun poured golden light across the vast New Mexico plains, illuminating the sprawling ranch that had been in Samuel Carter's family for 3 generations. He was a quiet man, a rancher whose hands were as rough as the land he worked, but whose heart carried a softness that few ever saw. Life on the range had carved deep lines into his face, yet it was the kind of weathered strength that came not just from labor, but from resilience. And yet, on this particular morning, he braced himself not against the desert wind or the stubborn cattle, but against the cruel whispers of his neighbors. For today, Samuel was not alone. Beside him walked 2 women, his brides. Apache sisters, daughters of a once proud people who now carried centuries of prejudice in the glances cast their way. The town had laughed when Samuel married them. Laughed louder when they rode into town together, the sisters dressed modestly yet proudly in woven skirts embroidered by their mothers' hands. The laughter wasn't just about their heritage, it was about the audacity of Samuel Carter, a respected rancher, choosing love where others only saw difference. "Carter's gone mad," one man sneered at the general store. "First he marries not 1, but 2 Apaches. They probably can't even speak English," another chuckled, slapping his thigh as if the insult were a joke worth savoring. "Wait till they try to order flour, they'll just grunt and point," a woman snickered from behind a row of canned goods. Samuel heard it all, though he kept his jaw clenched tight. He had expected resistance. He had expected ignorance. What he hadn't expected was how much it would hurt, because he knew the truth. For the sisters, Lena and Alina, carried stories deeper than any of these townsfolk could imagine. They were educated. They had studied at a mission school far from their homeland, where they learned not only English but mathematics, literature, even music. They had come back to their people not as outsiders, but as bridges, women who honored their traditions while also understanding the world beyond. But Samuel had asked them not to reveal this yet. He wanted them to live simply, quietly, without having to prove their worth to people too blind to see it. Still, as the mocking laughter echoed down the dusty street, he wondered if perhaps he had been wrong to shield them. The day the storm broke was the day Samuel decided enough was enough. It began at the town hall meeting, where ranchers gathered to discuss grazing rights and water shortages. Samuel brought his wives with him, though he knew what it would mean. Eyes followed them as they entered, whispers circling the room like vultures. "Looks like Carter brought his little savages," someone muttered. "Maybe they'll dance for us after," another man laughed. Samuel stood tall, his fists itching to clench, but Lena touched his arm lightly, her dark eyes calm. "Let them talk," she whispered. "They do not know." When the debate over the river water grew heated, one of the officials turned directly to Samuel. "And what do your women think, Carter? Or do they even understand what we're saying?" The room erupted with laughter. Chairs scraped against the floor, men slapped each other's backs, and women covered their mouths as though scandalized yet entertained. Samuel's face burned. He opened his mouth to defend them, but before he could, Lena rose slowly to her feet. Her voice cut through the noise like the ringing of a church bell, clear, steady, and unmistakably eloquent. "If we may," she began in perfect English, her tone carrying the grace of someone who had been taught by the finest teachers, "Water is not merely a matter of ownership but of stewardship. The river has fed this land long before any of us claimed it. Should we not, therefore, consider its care as a shared responsibility rather than a divided prize?" The room went silent. Every eye turned to her. Some mouths hung open. Others blinked as though their ears deceived them. Alina stood beside her sister, her own voice strong. "We were raised to honor both the earth and the people upon it. My father taught us to hunt, to ride, to give thanks for every drop of rain. My teachers taught me Shakespeare, Dickinson, and Whitman. Would you like me to quote them? Or perhaps you'd prefer I translate this discussion into French. We studied that, too." Gasps swept across the hall. The mockery dissolved into stunned silence. Men who had laughed the loudest now shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Samuel's heart swelled with pride as the sisters spoke, weaving reason, history, and compassion into their words. They didn't shout. They didn't accuse. They simply stood with dignity, speaking truth in a language the crowd had thought beyond their reach. By the time they sat down, the air in the hall had changed. No one laughed. No one sneered. The silence was heavy, not with mockery, but with shame. That night, as the Carters rode home under a sky strewn with stars, Samuel looked at his wives and felt tears prick his eyes. "I wanted to protect you," he admitted softly. "But I see now, you never needed my protection. The world needs your voices more than my silence." Lena squeezed his hand. "And we need your heart, Samuel. Because love is the strongest voice of all." Word spread quickly through the town. The next time Samuel and the sisters walked into the general store, no one laughed. Some even greeted them with quiet respect. And though prejudice doesn't vanish overnight, seeds of change had been planted. Weeks later, when a young boy from the town fell ill and the doctor could not arrive in time, it was Alina who nursed him back to health with remedies passed down through generations. When the schoolteacher grew ill, it was Lena who stepped in to teach the children, reciting lessons in English and sharing stories from both American poets and Apache elders. The same people who once laughed now found themselves grateful and humbled. The transformation wasn't in the sisters alone, it was in the people who chose to listen. The town began to see that wisdom doesn't come from skin or bloodline, but from the heart, the mind, and the courage to speak when silence is easier. Samuel often thought back to that first day in the town hall, when laughter had cut him like a knife. He realized then that the laughter had never been about his wives, it had been about fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of difference, fear that crumbled the moment truth was spoken with courage. And so, the ranch thrived. Not just in cattle and crops, but in love, in respect, and in the quiet power of two sisters who refused to be silenced. Years later, when strangers passed through the town and asked about the rancher with the Apache brides, the locals no longer laughed. They spoke with respect, even pride. They came here as outsiders, one old man would say. But they taught us all what it means to belong. And in the quiet of the ranch, under the endless sky, Samuel would look at Lena and whisper the truth he knew in his bones. Love is the language the world can never laugh away. The golden sun rose across the New Mexico plains, spilling its warmth over the Carter Ranch. To most, it was just another morning, cattle lowing in the fields, the distant bark of a ranch dog, the creak of wooden fences. But for Samuel Carter, the third-generation rancher who had spent his life working this land, today felt different. Not because the chores had changed, there were still troughs to fill and fences to mend, but because of the way people stared when he rode into town. And he wasn't riding alone anymore. Beside him, sharing the same wagon seat, were two women, Lena and Alina, Apache sisters who carried themselves with quiet dignity. Their dark hair glistened in the sunlight, braided neatly, their skirts embroidered with careful detail. To Samuel, they were his wives, his partners, his equals. But to the town of Dry Creek, they were the subject of ridicule. The jeers had started the moment Samuel announced his marriages. Carter's lost his mind, sneered one rancher at the saloon. He took not one, but two squaws. Lord help him, another barked, slapping his knee with laughter. They probably can't even speak English, muttered a woman outside the general store, her voice dripping with scorn. Samuel had grown used to the land testing him, storms flattening crops, coyotes prowling at night, even drought that cracked the soil. But nothing had tested him like the mockery of his neighbors. Every word stung because it wasn't just about him, it was about Lena and Alina, women with hearts full of kindness and minds sharper than most men he knew. He had wanted to shield them from the ugliness, to keep their dignity intact by avoiding confrontation. Let 'em laugh, he told his wives once, after a particularly cruel comment outside the church. They don't know the truth. But Lena only looked at him with steady eyes. Samuel, you cannot shield us forever. A tree that bends too long will break. Better to stand tall. Alina added softly, one day, they will learn who we are. Not by your defense, but by our own voices. Samuel had nodded, though he wasn't sure the town was ready for those voices. He feared that prejudice ran too deep, that nothing the sisters said would matter. But deep down, he also knew they were right. That day came sooner than expected. The town called for a meeting at the hall to discuss water rights. Drought had been creeping over the land, the river running lower with each passing season, and tempers were as dry as the soil itself. Samuel, as one of the largest landholders, was expected to attend. And he, perhaps foolishly, brought Lena and Alina with him. From the moment they stepped inside, whispers curled like smoke through the room. Men leaned toward each other with smirks. Women covered their mouths, hiding laughter behind their gloves. Look there, Carter brought his little savages, someone muttered. Maybe they'll dance for us after, another snickered. Samuel felt his fists clench, but before he could speak, Lena touched his arm, calm as ever. Let 'em talk, she murmured. Their words are only echoes of ignorance. But the laughter grew louder when one of the officials, red-faced and smug, turned to Samuel during the debate. What about your women, Carter? Do they even understand what we're saying? Or do they just grunt and nod? The hall erupted with cruel laughter. Samuel's jaw tightened. He rose halfway to his feet, ready to defend them. But before he could utter a word, Lena stood gracefully. Her voice rang out, clear and firm, in English as perfect as any preacher's. If I may, she said, her tone calm but commanding, water is not only a matter of possession but of responsibility. The river has fed this land long before any of us laid claim to it. Should we not, therefore, treat it as a gift to be shared, rather than a prize to be divided? The room fell silent. Every mocking face turned toward her, but now their smirks had vanished. And when Alina rose beside her, speaking in the same flawless English, the silence deepened into awe. The silence that followed Lena's words felt heavy, as though the room itself held its breath. For a moment, no one moved. The same men who had been chuckling enter. Their whiskers now sat stiff, their eyes wide. The women who had smirked behind their lace gloves suddenly found their fingers fidgeting nervously. Alina stepped forward, her voice steady but carrying a quiet strength. My sister speaks truth. Our people were raised to honor the earth, to take only what is needed, and to leave enough for those who come after. When the rains fail and the river grows shallow, the answer is not to fight each other for scraps, but to share, so all may survive. Her words flowed with the rhythm of someone who had studied both her ancestors' wisdom and the lessons of foreign teachers. She glanced at the men gathered there, her dark eyes unflinching. Do you think the land cares about our titles and fences? The river does not know rancher from farmer. It gives life, or it withholds. And if we waste our time in quarrels, then the earth will punish us all alike. It was as if a veil had been torn away. Samuel scanned the faces of his neighbors, men who had once laughed at the very idea of his marriages. Now those same men avoided his gaze, shifting uneasily in their seats. Some cleared their throats, as if trying to swallow the shame that suddenly pressed on them. Ladies, the official who had made the cruel remark stammered, his bluster gone. I didn't realize that we could speak. Lena finished softly. Her voice wasn't bitter, only honest. You assumed we were ignorant because of how we look, because of where we were born. But ignorance is not ours to bear. Her words landed harder than any fist Samuel could have thrown. He felt a swell of pride in his chest, so strong it nearly choked him. For the first time since the whispers began, he did not feel the weight of defending his wives, they were defending themselves, and in doing so, they were changing the air in the room. A frail cough broke the silence. Old Mrs. Givens, the schoolteacher, rose slowly from her chair. Her white hair glimmered in the lamplight as she studied the sisters. Then, with a voice trembling but clear, she said, these young women speak with more sense than half the men in this room. Perhaps it's time we stopped laughing and started listening. A ripple moved through the crowd. The tension softened, the shame thickened, and though not all faces were convinced, no one dared laugh again. When the meeting adjourned, Samuel guided Lena and Alina outside. The night air was cool, filled with the scent of mesquite and dust. He turned to them, his voice thick with emotion. I thought I had to protect you, he admitted. But today, you showed me, you never needed my protection. You needed my trust. Lena touched his hand gently. And now, Samuel, they know our voices. Sometimes truth must be spoken aloud, even when it cuts. Alina added with a soft smile, especially when it cuts. As they walked back to the wagon, Samuel noticed the stares that followed them weren't the same as before. There was no laughter now. Only a quiet, uneasy respect that hadn't been there before. In the weeks that followed, whispers turned into watchful silence, and silence slowly began to shift into reluctant acknowledgement. The townspeople weren't ready to embrace the sisters fully, but something had changed that night in the hall. Seeds had been planted. Seeds that would, in time, take root. One afternoon, a test of those seeds came sooner than anyone expected. The Miller boy, just 8 years old, fell gravely ill. His fever raged, and the town doctor was away on a call miles to the north. Panic spread through the Miller household, and whispers began in town, the boy wouldn't last the night. It was Alina who stepped forward, carrying the knowledge her mother had passed down, remedies made from herbs and roots, treatments drawn from generations of Apache healers. At first, Mr. Miller resisted, his pride bristling at the thought of an Indian woman tending to his son. But when the boy's fever spiked and his breathing grew shallow, desperation broke through his prejudice. Please, he begged, his voice cracking. Help him. And Alina did.